Hello everyone, welcome to VizConnect, connecting you with the art of data visualization and storytelling. My name is Sagar Kapoor. I'm part of customer success team at Tableau. VizConnect is a weekly Tableau community call which inspires you, motivates you to improve your Tableau skills. We have a YouTube channel, so all the sessions which are presented in VizConnect are uploaded to our YouTube channel. Go ahead, subscribe to it, some great content waiting for you. We have a LinkedIn group. Go ahead, connect with each other and learn from each other and follow us on VizConnect. And with that, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker. His name is Christian Felix. Christian is a Tableau developer and a data visualization specialist at Roche. He is a Tableau ambassador, user group leader, and winner of 2020 Ironviz competition. And today he will talk about the analytics pane and beyond, advanced analytics techniques for your Ironviz qualifier or for the next Tableau project. So without further ado, Christian, over to you.
Thank you so much. Greetings, everybody. It is morning here where I am, so I'll be sipping some coffee as I do my presentation. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, as Sagar mentioned, the presentation is called the Analytics Pane and Beyond. And really, it's Ironviz season. So the three key components for Ironviz: design, storytelling, and analysis. And there's a lot of great community content out there on design and storytelling. I wanted to focus this morning on the analysis piece and how you can use some of Tableau's native functionality to really drive new and informative insights with your visualization. So hopefully I did put the season and the episode up here. Sigur, hopefully this is correct. If not, you can let me know. I do think it is episode 22. So here we go. Just a little bit more about me. I am a Tableau ambassador, as mentioned. I'm a user group leader here in Tucson, Arizona. I am the Ironviz champion from last year. I'm a Tableau Desktop Certified Associate. I work at Roche Diagnostics here in Tucson, Arizona. Use Tableau, Alteryx every day to create business analytics and reporting tools for our business. And I'm a lover of the dark in terms of Tableau desktop or visual backgrounds. And I'm an enjoyer of the sunshine. Lots of sunshine here in Tucson, so I take advantage of it and really enjoy the weather here. So as I mentioned, it is Ironviz season, so just some brief context on how the contest works. And if you're not familiar with Ironviz, it is the global data visualization contest put on by Tableau. It's an annual thing, usually a very big deal at the Tableau conference. It will be again this year. And as mentioned, it's really, the judging is really three categories. So it's design, it's storytelling, and analysis. And historically, you have really a collection of Tableau ambassadors, previous Ironviz finalists, data visualization experts who are judging these entries. The qualifier competition is open now. I believe it's open through July 2nd. So if you haven't started already, take some time to look at, to find a data set that really has that combination of joy and happiness, and really one that you want to analyze to put together a qualifier visualization. But again, the focus today is on analysis, using the analytics pane to really drive that analysis. And it's important in the judging criteria because the analysis category is going to be the tiebreaker. So in case two vizes have the same score, the judges are going to look at the analysis score and use that as the tiebreaker to see who gets into the global competition and who wins the global competition. So analysis is a key component, and it's an important component of the qualifying contest and the final contest. So the analytics pane, if you've used Tableau at all, I believe since version 9, if I'm correct, you're familiar with the analytics pane. And so it's really a a means to do some really deep and insightful analysis, really just through drag and drop. And it's broken down into 3 different areas: summarize, model, and custom. And what I wanted to do is just go through some of these, not all of these features, and show you how I've used them, both in my Ironviz qualifier last year and in the Ironviz final visualization, to hopefully spark some inspiration or creativity so that you can apply it to your own visualization projects. Okay, so this is my Ironviz qualifier from last year on social capital and COVID-19. It was a long form viz, and I've really tried to highlight in each section some of the analytical techniques that I used. And what I'm going to do is just step through each of these and show you how I use these various analytical techniques to further the analysis and insight generation in my visualization. So if we remember the summarize pane, a couple of the things you can do is create constant lines and create average lines. So let's go ahead and see if we can navigate to that, and I could show you how I do that here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and download this. Open it up in Tableau Public, just so I can demo the pane, the analytics pane here, real time. And while Tableau Public's opening up, just some background on this data. So this was data that I got last year from Apple. And what they did was they basically used their map application, and they were able to get direction requests from people in US counties all over the world. So basically, if anybody goes to the Apple Maps, they go on their phone, they make a direction request, they were able to provide counts of those direction requests over time. And what they were trying to do was really track how some of the lockdown measures impacted people moving about, if the lockdown measures were effective or not. And so let me go ahead and open this up in desktop, and we can just show you how we might use the analytics pane to guide our users to really better understand what this line chart is showing us. So here's the chart in desktop. Really, it's as simple as just drag and drop. So I drag it onto the worksheet canvas, and then I'm able to choose what measure I want to apply this constant line to. So I can just drag it on to day. Really what I want to do is create 2 constant lines, one that provide a visual representation of when a lot of the lockdown, or when the pandemic was declared in the US. So that was mid-March timeframe. So let's call it March 15th. And really what this is doing is it's providing a constant line for the date that the pandemic was declared, and you can see how there's sort of an inflection point in these 2 lines. Again, another constant line, we can add one for day again. And let's change this to summer, and this was when a lot of the lockdown started to be eased. June 1. And then we have 2 reference lines, so we could edit these if we wanted to. Pandemic, just so we have some more context. And now we have 2 reference lines that give us an indication of what's happening in these line charts. So we have the groupings by social capital, high social capital, low social capital, and we could kind of see how this variable of the declaration of the pandemic impacts these direction requests. So very simple, very easy to do, but it allows your user and the consumer of your visual to really get some more context behind what you're trying to communicate in your analysis. Average lines are very similar, so we can use the analytics pane to quickly add average lines to a worksheet. What we're looking at here are individual counties. So these are counties in the United States that were surveyed and asked a simple question: when I am in public and expect to be within 6 feet of another person, I always wear a mask. And these are grouped by social capital decile. So counties with high social capital scores are greener, lower social capital scores are yellower. And you can see how the individual counties, which are also sized by COVID case count, break down by decile. Okay, but what we want to do to sort of complement the disaggregated data is use the analytics pane to just add a simple average line to add an aggregate data point to the visual. So again, going here, analytics pane, and just dropping an average line onto pane, and it'll allow you to choose what measure you want to apply it to. So in this case, I'm going to just apply it to the mask measure. And there we have an aggregate average line that really helps us better see, instead of just trying to look directly at the individual circles and try and tell, okay, which decile is higher or lower. We have this average line that allows us to easily see it. Just like the constant line, we can format it, make it white, make it easy to see, probably remove the label. And there we go. So we can easily see which one of these deciles, for most of the people, always wear a mask versus don't always wear a mask. So that's just a brief example of a couple of the ways you can use the analytics pane to just add some context to your visuals. And I wanted to go beyond the analytics pane a little bit to show you some other means and methods and techniques of analysis that I use in my qualifier. And there's things that you can do in your own analysis, in your own research of the data, to really add value to the visualization. So the first one is just data transformations. So sometimes you get raw data, and in and of itself, it can be useful to visualize, but sometimes just adding some simple transformations to the data can really make it easier visually to comprehend relationships or correlations. So here's an example. Here we're looking at the score of social capital for each county, again, and COVID cases. And I believe this was taken, the data was taken last summer. So this is not real-time data. It's somewhat stale, but it'll still demonstrate the concept. So if we just look at the social capital score compared to cases, and I've added a trend line here, we do see there is a relationship. R squared is relatively significant based off of the relationship is relatively significant based off of the p-value. But if we were to transform the data and look at cases per 100,000 people, it improves a little bit. So we can see a little more separation. We're able to see more of the counties. It's not so clouded by some of these outliers that we saw earlier. LA County, Miami-Dade, Maricopa, which were higher primarily because of the number of people. So if we were to normalize it based off of the population count, those are removed. But now we run into another problem where we have these smaller counties that have very few people and likely very few cases also, but they're also sort of clouding or making it difficult to see perhaps some of the other counties that are not so high in cases per 100K. So if we were able to transform the data again and log transform it, we have this nice cluster where a lot of those outliers are removed, and looking at the trend line again, a much better representation of the relationship between those two variables. So taking some time to really analyze the data, understand how it interacts with itself in terms of the different variables, and understanding what transformations might be necessary to really apply to really bring out certain things in your visual is really valuable, something value added that you can add to your visualization as an analyst. All right, so transformations and segmentation is another one. Okay, so this is a visual we looked at earlier. One of the things I did here was just use a basic decile analysis. I partitioned each of these counties into one of these 10 categories. Counties that had a high social capital score, counties that had a lower social capital score. And not only was it useful from an analysis perspective, but I think it added a bit of aesthetic appeal to the visual as well, and really just provided another way of looking at the data. So segmentation using decile, percentile analysis is something that you can easily do with Tableau, either with calculated field or in Tableau prep prior to consuming in Tableau. K-means clustering is another segmentation method that I'm going to go over a little bit later here. Okay, smoothing. So sometimes you get data like this, and there's a lot of seasonality to it. In this case, it's not by seasons necessarily, but it's by day of the week. So these mobility requests in the raw data were really higher on weekends than on weekdays. So what I wanted to do to really smooth this out so you can make some more inferences with the data is use a moving average. And so if I go in here, this calculation is basically just a window function that is using this parameter to go back a certain number of days. In this case, it's just one. So really there's no moving average at this point, but if we were to use this to increase the days, we'll see this line graph start to smooth a little bit and some more meaningful patterns start to emerge. All right, so for example, if we were to move this to 7 days, so now we're smoothing it basically by a week. We go from this somewhat hard to discern pattern where we're seeing these spikes on weekends to a little bit better. And we're also correcting for this known data error issue that Apple recognized in the data set. And if we were to even go a week further to 2 weeks, we can get perhaps even some more inference from the chart. So smoothing data, it can remove the noise in your data set and can allow for some really important and meaningful patterns to be drawn out from the data. So now what we see here quite easily is once the pandemic was declared in some of these US counties, the counties with the higher social capital really looked like they decreased their travel based off of the mobility requests faster than the lower social capital counties. And vice versa, when states were reopened, you see some of these higher social capital counties that were able to travel a little bit more, perhaps because the virus was contained more so than the lower social capital counties. So using some smoothing of your data, using some combined with some segmentation of your data, really allows for some interesting patterns to start to emerge. Okay, so that's segmentation, transformations, smoothing. How about cross-sectional analysis? So sometimes I think it's necessary to expand the context for a visualization beyond just a single data point and viewing that data point in relationship or in context with the other data points. So we can look at measures of institutional health, for example, for a given county, Orange, California, which is my hometown county. But to truly understand what's going on in that county, I think adding in some points where we're looking at all of the counties and looking at aggregate measures is very helpful. In this case, the county itself is pretty close to the aggregate measures for the median. So we can add a median reference line just like we did using the analytics pane before. And in addition, we can also add a KPI to really show us what decile this county is falling in. And taking it a step further, using cross-sectional analysis, we can add a distribution to the visual. So these are just methods where you're taking a single data point, and instead of just visualizing it in isolation, you can add various ways to show how it compares to the population. All right, so I think we talked about constant lines, smoothing, cross-sectional analysis, segmentation, average lines. So there's, of course, other things that we can do. Let's see, exploratory analysis. I know this is a bit of an eye chart. Just don't worry about reading it. Basically, what it's saying is, yes, there's a known negative correlation between social capital, the increase of COVID-19, the spread. But what about other factors? Poverty rates, population density, demographics, age distribution of the population. How do those things impact this relationship that we're seeing here? And so just adding for a user the ability to filter on those variables and isolate them to analyze that relationship is pretty powerful. So if we wanted to just look at counties, for example, that had a high poverty rate and see if this relationship between social capital and COVID still applies, we can do that. We can see the counties that are within this range on the map. If we wanted to just look at older population, maybe older population is a factor, a confounding factor, but we still see that relationship apply. Education, perhaps. Yep. So there's all these ways we can facilitate exploratory analysis just by adding some basic filters and allowing a user to explore the visual on their own. Parameter actions, there's a lot that's been put together in the community on things that can be done with parameter actions. I've referenced some of those here, blog posts, dashboards that document a whole bunch of use cases for parameter actions by Kevin Flerledge. But really, going beyond the analytics pane, there are so many things you can do with parameter actions, with set actions, that can really help further your analysis. So here, for example, instead of just focusing on a single question, I'm just adding some buttons here to allow a user to toggle this visual based off of the response of the survey. So instead of looking at the always response, a user can click on one of these buttons and see, what about sometimes people who responded sometimes to a survey? What does that distribution look like? And the parameter action is set up basically so the action passes the value to the parameter updates the visualization. Very basic parameter, it's updating parameter action, it's updating this mass parameter, which then gets passed to the visual here. Okay. All right, so parameter actions. Now I'm going back to this line chart. So we added some context with the constant lines that I think were quite helpful in allowing a viewer to see the inflection points based off of these dates. But really, you want to make it even easier than that if possible. So you want to, as much as possible, do the analysis yourself and then input that into the viz and allow a user to really just consume it so they don't have to do it themselves. And so with these annotations, it's really describing what's going on in this line chart for the viewer. So prior to the pandemic, you have mobility patterns that were roughly the same between these social capital deciles. After the pandemic, you see the divergence. And then this annotation just walks through how you're seeing the divergence again after the lockdowns were eased. So annotations are really a way for you to do the analysis on your own and then sort of guide your viewer through that analysis so it's easier for them to understand what you're trying to communicate through the visual. Set actions, just like parameter actions, there's a lot out there in the community about things you can do with set actions, but they're really a powerful tool to further analysis in your visual. So here I have two different choropleth maps. They're blank canvases at this point. And what I did was just allow a user basically to fill the maps based off of the percentiles. And it's really meant to communicate the correlation geographically between these two measures. So if we were to start filling some of these in using the set action, we can start to see some of the geographic correlation between these low social capital counties here in the South and these counties that experienced a high COVID-19 case rate per 100,000 people. Similarly, if we continue to click on it, we can see that same correlation between some of the higher social capital counties and lower. Green represents the lower COVID-19 case rate. So again, set actions, just like parameter actions, a really powerful tool in your toolkit to really help just generate some really cool insights for your visualization and make it very visually powerful and interactive for a consumer. Um, I have this dashboard hidden right now in my Tableau public profile. I'll make it public so you can go in here and click through some of these um, to do some additional research on some of these things at your leisure if you'd like to. Okay, so going back to the analytics pane, model. So you have 5 different options here. If things are grayed out, then using the measures within your view, it's not possible to use those techniques. If it's black like this, then you're able to use it, drag it onto the viz, and apply the technique. So average with 95% confidence line adds 1 or more sets of average lines with distribution bands to your view. Similarly with the median, trend line adds a trend line to your view, forecast will add a forecast to your view, and cluster will run the clustering algorithm. So again, going to my viz, this time we are going to look at this one, the Ironviz final visualization, and just a couple ways that the analytics pane was useful and could be useful for you if you have data that it can be applied to. So trend lines. So if we were to look at how we could use trend lines in this visual. Right now, it's just a simple scatter plot. Looking at pollution and GDP per capita on the x-axis. We can kind of see, it looks like there's a relationship there, but to really know for sure, we can use the analytics pane within Tableau and drag a trend line. And we have 5 different options. So we can just, to explore what the best fit might be, we can just start dragging, dropping, and seeing how the R-squared and p-value measures come out. So using a linear trend line, we do have a somewhat significant relationship. R-squared is 49.49 and p-value is significant, statistically significant. But what if we explored a logarithmic trend line? We can see the R-squared is a little bit better, so perhaps the logarithmic trend line is a better fit than the linear. We can do the same for exponential. Again, we even get a little better there. Polynomial, not so much. We don't really have this sort of weird curvature, maybe in the data, but from a reality check, I don't think that's how the underlying process relationship works. What about a power trend line? So this power trend line really seems to be the best fit. So we have an R-squared of 0.65 with the statistically significant p-value. And this makes sense, I think, based off of what we know of the relationship between pollution and GDP per capita. We know it's probably not linear. At a certain point, no matter how wealthy a country gets, we know that the pollution levels can't go below 0. There is this sort of diminishing benefit as you get wealthier and wealthier. So even with some of the Northern European cities, countries, North American countries, no matter how much their GDP per capita improves, it's only going to reduce pollution so much. So we have this flattening out of the trend line. So not only is this trend line statistically significant, it matches, I think, what we would expect to see based off of how the underlying relationship in reality seems to work. So we can use this function, and this is what I did in the final, use this function to model predictions based off of changes in GDP. So if GDP goes up by 5–10%, we can model how pollution would decrease based off of the function provided very easily and quickly with Tableau. So that's trend lines. What about clustering. So instead of just looking at these observations, we can use a clustering algorithm to identify clusters, high, low, medium, in this case, just with 3 of them in the data. Go to Ironviz here, cluster 1. That looks a bit more familiar. Not quite. So here the colors give us a sort of a segmentation based off of the pollution ratios that we can then, or the pollution measures that we can then save if we wanted to the data table and use later in formulas or calculated fields if we wanted to. But clustering is just a valuable way to give us some segmentation based off of the measures that we have in the view, and scatter plots are a very good way to visualize that segmentation. All right, so again, it's not meant to be comprehensive, but hopefully it's just giving you a brief overview of the analytics pane and some other means of analysis that you can use either in your Ironviz qualifier or in some of your other Tableau projects to really draw out some meaningful insights. And I wanted to include this as well. This is not analysis specific, but it's a way to, in terms of best practices, to visualize your analysis. This is the visual vocabulary put out by Andy Kriebel, and I've linked to it so you can go out and see the viz on Tableau Public. And it's just meant to provide just some best practices of how to visualize certain data or certain concepts. Very powerful, very useful, one of the most widely viewed visualizations on Tableau Public. If you haven't checked it out, I would thoroughly recommend checking it out. Pre-attentive attributes. Again, this is more of a visual best practice and analytical best practice, but certainly if you're thinking about submitting for an Ironviz qualifier, good to know and good to have a grasp on. So things like form, color, all these different pre-attentive attributes that you can use to visually drive home and make sure your analysis gets recognized easily for the viewer. And then Gestalt principles, finally, another viz on Tableau Public that similar to the pre-attentive attributes is a way just to easily make sure your visual is communicating your analysis, ways that psychologically people tend to recognize and perceive easily. So conclusion, yeah, thank you again for having me on VizConnect. It's always fun to talk about analysis, my visualizations, and happy visiting to everybody. If you are planning on submitting to the Ironviz qualifier, best of luck. I wish you well, and that's it.
Thank you, Christian, for that. And I think thank you for explaining us how we can effectively use the analytics pane.
You're welcome. Absolutely. I know it was quick. Hopefully there were some nuggets in there that were useful for some people.
Yeah, and I think everyone is excited about how you have gone ahead and consolidated everything into a workbook, and you will go ahead and share it with everyone. Yeah, I think thank you for that.
Yep. I will unhide it from my Tableau Public profile. I will make it downloadable so you can download it and reverse engineer it or apply those concepts to your own data set.
Perfect. Thank you. There is a question in the chat, Chris. So Siva is asking, annotations are a bit of a struggle when there is a filter in play as the text within annotations are static. Any advice on how best to use them in a way where there are filters in use?
Yeah, I would, in that case, I would move away from annotations and just use floating worksheets that have the filters applied to them. So that way, when the filter is applied, the worksheet will update dynamically based off of the selection made by the user.
Thank you, Chris, for that. So if you have any question for Christian, just go ahead and put it in the chat. Happy to ask him. So I can ask the next question, Christian. I think one thing which I want to ask, when you were competing for Ironviz last year, what were two or three things that which helped you, right, in terms of preparing for it, maybe for the qualifier, and then also for the Viz in which you were competing with the top three?
Yeah, I think for the qualifier, one of the things that really helped me was that I knew the data set very well. I worked with it earlier in the year, so I had a couple months worth of understanding of the data. And I think one of the biggest challenges, or one of the things that takes the most time, but is really the most valuable in terms of producing analysis that is insightful and new, perhaps, is just having that time to study and analyze the data. It just sometimes takes time for those new insights to emerge and to pop up. So that was one thing that I think was really valuable. The second was feedback. So once I had at least a first draft of visualization, I reached out to people in the community and just asked for some feedback. And that was very helpful, just to get another set of eyes to look at my visual in a way that maybe I was blind to or wasn't seeing based off of my familiarity with it. Yeah, if there's one more thing, so that was two. I think, yeah, I think there's things that I took from my prior experience in finance, in reliability, quality, and applied to my Ironviz final. For example, if you go back to that scatter plot, where are we at here? Yeah, so this sort of econometric modeling, where we're using a variable to model changes in this case, pollution, is something that I did quite frequently with finance work that I had done both in academics for my study and in work. So just using things that I had gathered in my career and pulling them in a modified fashion and applying them to my Ironviz qualifier in my final, I think was helpful.
Thank you, Chris. I think yeah, I can just ask the last question as we don't have any other questions in the chat. What was the role of Tableau community, right? Like in terms of shaping you and improving your Tableau skills, and also what has changed in the last 1 year, right? One thing which I have seen, Chris, and this is kudos to you that you have always been approachable for, right? For these sessions like these, people can just go ahead and connect with you for help. So just wanted to understand what have things changed after Ironviz for you.
Yeah, the role of the community is so powerful. I think it can be intimidating to approach something like Ironviz cold if you haven't been practicing before in community projects. But if you've been doing things like Iron Quest, Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, Project Health Viz, Real World Fake Data, all the different community challenges, then whether you realize it or not, you've already been intentionally practicing your craft and getting feedback probably. So something like Ironviz, although it's a bigger competition and it's a step up, is not necessarily out of the ballpark in terms of a sort of next progression. In terms of what's changed over the last year, lots of additional speaking opportunities. Lots of additional opportunities to connect outside of the network I had before. So growing a professional network and just getting to talk more about something I love, like data visualization. Those opportunities have all increased. And I'm very happy with the work I do at Roche. It's a great company and I have a great job. But certainly job opportunities, things like that on LinkedIn have been there as well. So yeah, Ironviz is a great opportunity to grow your network, grow professionally, meet new people, and get to do more of what you love in terms of data visualization.
So thank you, Christian, for that. So I think with that, it was an honor to have you on VizConnect. Thank you for sharing all the tips and tricks and resources.
Yeah, thank you. And like you said, if you ever anybody wants to connect, feel free to ping me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and happy to do what I can to help you along your own journey.
Perfect. Yep. So I think you heard it from Chris. Go ahead, participate in Ironviz. At least give a try. I think it will be a great
Yeah.
experience and journey for you. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. So I think with that, thank you everyone for joining. We'll see you next week. Take care, be safe, and keep tableauing. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.